Hello and welcome to Matchup Plus Plus, the 6++ show that tries to show you how you match up to the UK tournament meta. I'm Jack, and I am joined this time by my lovely friend Scrivo.
Hello. I am a real human, honest.
Yeah, beep boop produce content. So this time, speaking of beeps and boops, we are talking about Ironstorm Spearhead for Space Marines, as you can probably tell by the title of this video. So we've both played a bit of Ironstorm, so we both played a bit against Ironstorm, so we kind of have a bit of knowledge to impart with you guys. So let's just crack straight into it, because that's what we like to do here in Matchup Plus Plus. So Ironstorm Spearhead. Let's talk about the basics. So stuff we're going to be talking about constantly all over these other slides. So we just want to sort of go into things. So first of all, the detachment roll, you can roll one hit, wound, or damage roll per unit per phase. Very useful efficiency buff there. There's a couple of enhancements that are really ubiquitous. You'll always see. The first one's target auditory web, all vehicles unit keywords. Pretty sure it's just vehicle keyword units. Gain lethal hits within 6 inches. We've got Master of Machine War, 6-inch fallback and shoot, and advance and shoot aura. Very useful for vehicles as well. We have Mercy's Weakness. This is the key damage output stratagem that you'll see used probably every turn. You can use it when your vehicle is when a unit is targeting a unit below starting strength. You get sustained hits 1, and if you are a vehicle, you also get critical hits of 5s.
Yeah.
Which is a great combination, especially when you can combine it with the lethal hits aura. And then we have Armor of Contempt. It's a pretty universal Space Marine stratagem for -1 AP for incoming attacks on one unit. But we're going to talk about it a lot when it comes to resilience, so it's worth going into. Anything else I've not covered there, Scrivo? Anything?
The other kind of ones that do come up are very situational, so you can go games without seeing them. So
yeah,
we could touch on them, but they don't really come up that often.
Okay. So let's talk about data. So there's something really important we have to go over here, because obviously Space Marine chapters, they all get split up in most data sets that we use. And when you go around on the internet, we use StatCheck's wonderful data set here. So that does split everything up. So the downside is it makes data very hard to collate when you look at Space Marines as a whole, and you end up with weird stats like regular Space Marine Ironstorm having like a 43% win rate, and then Black Templars having like a 63% win rate. It ends up with being really weird. So what we've done here is we have combined the win rate for all of the Ironstorm detachments together into one block. And that's what I've based this stats on. Also, something new I'm going to start trying is looking at data specifically for the top 40% of players, which is in theory is most 3-2 players, because I think that's the most people who are most likely to get the most out of this. If going less than 3-2 is the matchup is less important, right? But learning your matchups are sort of in the 3-2 range I think is really important. So I think that it provides a lot of interesting data for us and takes out some of the weirdness that can happen on very low tables. So let's just crack straight into it. So overall win rate for Ironstorm Spearhead, 57%. Player is 4%, and their event wins are 8. In terms of what we perform best against overall, we're looking at Astra Militarum, Adeptus Custodes, and Grey Knights. And what we have the worst win rate against is Eldari and Thousand Suns. I didn't provide a third because there wasn't really anything else they had a negative win rate into. Regular Space Marines had a negative win rate into a couple of things, but all the other detachments didn't. So I didn't really think it was. I thought it was more of an outlier than anything. So, yeah, what do you think of those, Scrivo?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. So an army that's very consistent with their shooting, it also does quite well into Chaos Knights as an example, because especially if it's War Dog spam, you can just pick them up. Even when you were having people taking Ironstorm with Whirlwinds, those were doing the work into things like that. And Astra Militarum, bodies and tanks, it doesn't matter what it is, you can just chew through it. So it does make sense. So
yeah, the stuff like Gladiator Reapers really good at picking up Kassakin. Even on Overwatch, they can pick them up. And then the Ogrins kind of get bodied a little bit because you have the stratagem for ignoring modifiers. That -1 damage modifier for Ogrins kind of goes out the window a little bit. Custodes, again, that one makes sense to me. It's just a lot of high damage, high AP shooting. It's just like quantity of shots. It just is enough to overwhelm the Custodes saves, really. And Custodes, they're not the best anti-tank army. And, it kind of just the Ironstorm doesn't really play into the game that Custodes wants to play, because a lot of this data is it's not just from the latest data slate, it's from the previous one as well, because there's very little changes in between the two. So I thought it was more important to have a broader data set for what we were talking about. And then Grey Knights, again, it's one. Grey Knights do struggle a little bit to kill vehicles, right? So that can be very difficult to play into because of that. And then performing worse into Eldari and Thousand Suns. Thousand Suns probably have quite a relatively easy time into vehicles because they have a lot of mortal wounds they can throw out. A lot of dev wounds and stuff, rerolls to wounds, stuff like that. And Eldari are just evil. If you played recently against the triple Scourge, triple oh gosh, I can't remember the other jump shoot unit for Eldar is called.
Warp Sliders?
Not that one. The other
Dark
one.
Reapers. Dark Reapers?
No, the hover ones, the 4-drop ones.
Oh, Shadow Spectres.
Shadow Spectres, yeah, that was
How
it.
could I forget them? I was like,
so yeah, triple Shadow Spectre, triple Scourge, triple D cannon is a real pain for vehicles to play into. And Eldar play very well into the low mobility of Ironstorm, and they struggle to get around. Any vehicle detachment will struggle to get around walls and shoot around it. So Eldar play very well into that, and they can use things like Phantasm and Fire and Fate to manipulate that. So that's quite strong for them. But yeah, I think that I covered. Is there anything else you guys want to cover on the stats? I mean, the perform worst against anything that I missed.
It doesn't really surprise me with the stats there, and I think anything that's power armor, so Grey Knights, normal Space Marines, it does kind of okay into, as long as they're not too skewed one way or the other. I think it struggles sometimes into things like Blood Angels, purely because anything that's a high combat mobility army will just lock it into its deployment zone. Even if it doesn't kill your vehicles, if you haven't got the enhancement there, you're then stuck. You'll lose some efficiency each turn, and it's something that you can counter by having things like your scouts being like doing a better job with screening, but it all comes down to the matchup, I think, for that.
Okay. All right, so let's move on to the next slide then. So most wanted. So the first one we got on the list here is the Tech Marine. He's basically in every single list. He carries enhancements, the Leaflet's Aura, the Master of Machine War Aura, the turn damage to 0 enhancement. It's just super useful. He repairs vehicles, he gives +1 hit, gets lone op. It's basically the perfect character for this detachment. It just synergizes so well, and you need him to carry these enhancements. So it's basically the quintessential character for this detachment, so it makes sense you see several of them. The Gladiator Reaper is the next one. So the Gladiator Reaper's detachment also gets sustained 2 when shooting against infantry. It has dev wounds and twin links as standard. So when you get that sustained 2 and combine it with Mercy's weakness, and you combine that with Oath of Moment, you just get an absolutely ridiculous number of hits and wounds, and then you can just smash a ton of dev wounds through, like 7, 8, 9 in one go. And it just kills basically everything rather than just infantry, but especially kills infantry. The next one we have here is the Vindicator. It's not been so popular in the past, but talking to players who are playing a lot of Ironstorm and sort of making an educated guess for the future to future-proof this a little bit, we believe that the Vindicator is going to become very popular. So the weapon profile of the Vindicator is basically a perfect does-everything weapon. So you've got strength 14. AP 3, damage D6 with D6 plus 3 shots with blast.
Yeah.
So that kills strength 14, damage D6, AP 3. I mean, that kills vehicles. The D6 shots blast kills elite infantry, regular infantry. You combine this with Mercy's weakness, and you can get even more shots, and it just gets everything. And then on top of all of that, it is T11 with a 2-up save. So it's just also really, really tough. Synergizes very well with Armor of Contempt, and just creates this really good and helps stop getting shut down by being tagged, because they can still shoot into combat when they're tagged.
And the one downside to them as a unit is the D6 damage can be quite swingy, but in the detachment you can save the reroll for that.
Yeah,
if it really matters, which I think is really key.
Yeah. Next we have the Predator Destructor. Main value is the fact that it's incredibly cheap, 130 points for this weapon, for this tank. So the weapon profiles go really well with the Lethal Hits aura and Mercy's weakness, because we're looking at strength 9, AP 1, damage 3. Strength, is it strength 9 or 10? I can't quite remember.
Strength 9.
Yeah, strength 9. And then there's 6 shots. And then you can just slap some las cannons on it as well, because its rule is +1 AP when shooting infantry, which of course means you fit it with a bunch of anti-tank weapons, because that's just how these things go. It's better than heavy bolters.
Yeah.
It's just very cheap and just synergizes very well, even with the low AP. And then lastly is the Scout Squad, the Humble Scout Squad. It's basically an all-included in every Space Marines detachment. Just there for actioning the poor man's uppy downy, so it goes up and then comes on from board edge. It screens out, it infiltrates, it cleanses, it homers. Is there anything you can think of that we've maybe missed on there?
So for a while we did see whirlwinds. I can see murmurings as well for that if we do start to see a slight hoardy meta, like whirlwinds not having to suffer the penalty through the stratagem, shooting into a blast into a big 20 unit of orc boys. It's nothing that you wouldn't want to have, really. Like, I can see that coming up. That feels like, because it used to be a thing that you used to do just to pick off someone's back line kind of stuff. But if there's a lot of infantry bodies, even like maybe to pick off the grots, if orcs become a threat, it's not something I wouldn't sniff at. So.
Yeah, definitely. I think it will pop up here and there, right?
Yeah,
it's always hard to say no to indirect.
Yeah.
All right. Next on the list, we've got a special slide here specifically for Space Marines, and that's I'm calling it Chapter Traits. Because you end up with all these different Space Marine chapters playing the same detachment, you do end up with a couple of quirks here and there. So the first one is Black Templars. So Black Templars have Black Templar Primaris vehicles, which are the same as the regular ones. They just have they just have extra multi-metals on them.
Yeah, which they do pay for now, thankfully.
Yeah. And they have Crusader squads, which are like regular Marine squads, but they get more special weapons, and they're cheaper, I think. So
yeah, makes sense.
Why not? And do you want to go over the Dark Angels one, since you are the Dark Angels man?
So the big one is Azrael. So the biggest problem you've got, especially if you're playing fixed with this detachment, is you don't really have CP. So having Azrael gives you a CP if he's on the battlefield, and the Dark Shroud is often used because it gives an aura of -1 to hit. So if you're a static castle of vehicles and people are trying to get lines at you, can't hurt.
Cover as well works really well with the Redemptors and any Vindicators and stuff. And then the Dark Angels, again, they're more commonly used with the Redemptors and Storm Ravens, right?
Yeah.
When we look at lists. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, speaking of lists, we've got a couple of lists here. Do you want to cover the Dark Angels first? I've done a lot of talking. I feel like I need to
certainly.
out the load.
Just to run through the list, it's Azrael, a lieutenant with a combi weapon with Master of the Machine War, which is the things can fall back within the aura of him. Tech Marines with the two other ones, so targeting aura, augury web, which is another aura, which is the lethal hits, and then up to the Omnissiah, which is the blanket damage. So all the good stuff. Company heroes, I think, goes with Azrael, which depending on where you play, that's how it gets ruled. The Dark Shroud then giving it all nice cover. Scout Squad to help screen so you're not getting absolutely bodied right at the beginning of the game, or even just to be something you use on a sideline. Then 3 Redemptors, all with plasma, because that's the best loadout for this detachment, really, because you get the great shots. The Storm Speeder Thunderstrike's in there because if it hits a unit, everything else gets +2 wound against it, which is really useful. And then 2 Storm Raven gunships, which probably have a Redemptor sat on board of them.
Yeah.
And it's just flinging them out forward, getting them to a nice angle, because the biggest problem this detachment often has is you start quite a cagey deployment, and then you have to pick a turn to sort of start unpacking properly. And even if you're not actually going to unpack, you've got to spend all that time to maneuver these big vehicles round the ruins to not get shot whilst you're half positioned as well. So having those Storm Ravens gives you that opportunity to just kind of fling them forward. Plus the Storm Ravens themselves are -1 damage, which is they're like flying Redemptors in that respect, and some good shooting as well. So
Yeah, it's definitely one of the more skewier versions of
yeah,
Ironstorm, I think, because it does provide a wall of 5 units with -1 damage and a 2-up save. So
yeah, it's a
um,
stat check of sorts, I suppose.
yeah, and the Storm Raven itself has a lot of guns on it, so it does benefit
Yeah,
for a lot
yeah,
from Mercy's weakness. It's a very
yeah.
efficient unit.
It's got some Hurricane Bolters or Tempest Bolters, 2 Melters, and 2 Las Cannons normally, which is just lovely.
Yeah. So that's one of the one of the archetypes you like to see. The other one is Black Templars. I do think often regular Space Marines follow this kind of very similar archetype, just without the Crusaders and
Yeah,
sort of stuff like that. So this is kind of the other version. So we got 2 set Marines again, one with Target Augury Web for the Lethal Hits Aura and Master of Machine War for fallback and advance and shoot.
yeah,
We've got 2 units of 5 Crusaders, an Impulsor, a Rhino, 2 Gladiator Lancers, 3 Gladiator Reapers, 2 Gladiator Valiants, 2 Eliminator Squads, a Predator Destructor, and 2 Scout Squads. Now, just to be clear, this is a list from before the data slate, so the points are slightly different.
yeah,
So bear that in mind. You can drip a Scout Squad, and it's basically the same list.
yeah.
So this one is kind of just leaning into the fact that Gladiators' weapons just work well with stuff. They're just either very efficient with the Lancer, or they work very well with the detachment stratagems with the Reaper.
Yeah,
We have Impulsors full of Eliminator Squads, making use of the Jankery, which is you get the Eliminators out, shoot them, get back in the vehicle, and then the vehicle can shoot again with its firing deck if it hasn't shot yet. And then it's basically just ton of holes, right? Ton of
yeah.
holes.
And the Crusaders are pretty safe as well because they're in that Rhino, and
Yeah,
then they can just disembark, and then you've got a free Rhino.
yeah. So this is the sorts of things you are likely to see in an Ironstorm list. Again, stuff can move around here and there. You might see more predators. You might see more Vindicators. You might see more Wild Ones. But this is kind of like a rough estimation of what we think.
Yeah, generally it's 6 hulls I've seen as a bare minimum for a lot of matchups if they're not going with the Dreadnoughts.
Yeah. So let's talk about tips and tricks for dealing with Ironstorm Spearhead. So the first one I've got on here is wrapping vehicles in combat is a key strategy. So do you want to explain that one, Scrivo?
So unless they've got the ability to fall back and shoot through the enhancement, if you tag a unit into their vehicle, that vehicle can only shoot at the thing it's been tagged by, unless it's a blast weapon, and then it can't shoot them. So it's really limiting the output of that vehicle. Obviously, you've got to get there, but with something like, say, World Eaters, if you're not necessarily going to be chewing through them with your Corn Berserkers or whatever you've got there, being able to tag them and just stop them forces them to be going backwards when they want to fall back as well, which gets them away from the center objectives, which normally an Ironstorm player doesn't want to be in their deployment zone too long.
Yeah, and if you can start forcing desperate escape tests on vehicles,
Yeah,
you can CP roll those, but it's still a big risk to take,
yeah,
especially on such an expensive model, because you're losing an entire unit instead of just one
yes.
model.
I've watched it happen, and it's not fun.
So next up, so vehicles are slow and can't go through other vehicles, and they can't go through sort of ruin walls either. This drastically reduces the mobility of the list in general. which is something that you can take advantage of. The ability, UKTC terrain is a big one. Obviously, you can hide behind the various like L turns, the middle ruin, quite easily. Armies like Eldar, as we spoke about before, can use this to great advantage. But lots of armies can do it as well. You can hide from an Ironstorm list.
Yeah.
Um,
And you can herd it as well. So if you've tagged it, if you put other units in locations that it'd want to fall back into, it can't go anywhere then.
Move blocking is also very easy because they can't just go around into the ruin. You just block the gaps between the ruins, stops them coming forward. And targeting the scoring units early can make it hard for Ironstorm to score secondaries. This list is really good at killing stuff. I think Ironstorm kind of starts to struggle when it comes to secondaries, and to a lesser extent primary if they get like move blocked and headed back. So targeting stuff like your scout squads, your assault intercessors with jump packs, the all units and the rhinos, stuff like that. Targeting those and trying to get rid of them, they're a really good way to limit the scoring opportunities of Ironstorm. Still going to feel bad because there's a good chance you're just going to die at a rate of knots, but you can stop them scoring, then you can win the game overall.
Exactly.
Anything else there, Scrivo, that we can cover?
I think we've very much covered that there. So to me, the other one is maybe if they do go for killing secondaries, if you play defensively and say if they're doing bring it down because you've got a lot of vehicles as well, don't fall into the trap of going forward to try to kind of meet them head on. If you choke their secondaries and you can hide your kind of infantry on the middle objectives, they have to then come out to you. So it's a lot of the time with Ironstorm I found if you're the one that has to come out first, you have to then survive the clapback, which doesn't always work, and blanking 1 damage doesn't save you.
Yeah. Ironstorm ultimately, I feel like, is kind of it's a big stat check, right?
Yeah.
It's a pretty simple detachment. There aren't like loads of tricks and shenanigans to it. It really is just kind of they're going to shoot you and it's going to be really efficient because it's going to have loads of rerolls, going to have loads of sustained and stuff like that. And that will just win some games for them. But there are ways for you to play into it. Some factions will find it easier than others, and I think that's what makes Ironstorm such a strong list overall and such a popular competitive pick, because some factions just don't have the kind of army design to kind of deal with the question that they ask.
Exactly.
Because we spoke already about Mercy's weakness as a really strong stratagem for them. Other ones to watch out for. You've got you got the names of them in front of you?
I do. Bear me 2 seconds. So we've got Vengeful Animus, which is just auto explode, which can be useful situationally because you're guaranteed you're gonna, if they've clustered around you and wrapped you, you then blow up that unit that they've done it with.
Especially got a Storm Raven.
Very, very nice. And then the one that I do find quite impactful sometimes is Power of the Machine Spirit. So this one is very niche because it has to be when you've been taken to below half starting strength. So it's easy to play around in some respects because if you get them down below half strength with something that you don't care about, you then can finish it off or try to finish it off with another unit. But it's where its strength is that if, say, they've got one unit that's very good at killing a vehicle and they've gone, right, I've got to bring it down this turn, I'm taking that out. If they don't quite do it because you've popped Armor Contempt, you then do Power of the Machine Spirit and you shoot them back at full ballistic skill. That's horrible.
Yeah.
With all these reroll mechanics and lethal hits as an aura, it punishes someone if they don't finish the vehicle off. And I found situationally that can really just like, it can go from a turn where they go, right, I'm definitely going to get my secondaries to, I've not done it and I've lost a vehicle trying to do it. Not helpful.
Yeah, especially if you're targeting a vehicle with not dedicated anti-vehicle weaponry.
Yes.
If you're just throwing everything in the kitchen sink at something.
Hoping,
and it can be quite difficult. But as you say, there are ways to play around it. For example, if you have a vehicle that's like just above half, and then you like throw a grenade at it to reduce it to below half, that won't trigger the stratagem, and then you can shoot it safely because you haven't reduced it to below half strength.
Haven't resolved attacks is specifically the reason as well.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite specific, the wording on that stratagem. So there are ways you can play against it. And then there's one to ignore modifiers, isn't it? I mentioned
Yeah,
it before.
unbowed conviction.
Yes, so that lets you ignore use it in the command phase, right?
Yeah.
So so it lets you ignore modifiers for that vehicle. It's very useful against stuff like Satan.
Yeah.
And I think there's a couple of orc vehicles with -1 damage, right? Or am I thinking ninth edition?
I think the Kilrig might now still, but you might not see that. So, but the
Okay, fair
interesting
enough.
one is it works in reverse as well. So if they've crocked one of your vehicles, it's not next to attack marine, and it's going to be at -1 ballistic skill, you undo it. So
Yeah,
when you're desperate, it can
another
help.
another trick that can be used with this stratagem is if you have a vehicle below half and needs to take a battle shock test, you can use a stratagem on it, and if they fail it, their OC doesn't go down. So they can use that as like a pseudo um, auto pass battle shock test. Um, to if they need it to hold on to an objective or do an action, or not do an action, but hold onto an objective. Can That's like another little thing they can pull out of nowhere. So yeah, that's everything. Trying to think if there's anything that we haven't covered for Ironstorm. I think that's pretty much everything. It's pretty simple detachment, realistically.
And that's why I think it works quite well for a teams format, because it's consistent, simple, and it does a job.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, as long as you know it's coming, I think you can design your lists against it. It's a weird one because we are obviously going into a meta that has a lot of hordes in it. You know, your endless swarm, your green tides, very heavy on the infantry. But now we're also looking at things like Ironstorm in there as well. So you've got to be prepared for both. And if you do just bring a bunch of anti-elite stuff, for example, if you're like I'm going to use the Tau example because I'm a Tau player. If you're a Tau player and you bring a bunch of Riptides and that's your anti-tank, like you're going to have a bad time against Ironstorm, as I have found out multiple times. But yeah, so yeah, dedicated anti-tank is going to be the key, and high AP stuff, right? If you're relying on auto cannons and AP1 stuff, that's probably not going to get the job done.
Especially if it's got Redemptors in the build, because it's a 2-up save base. They're going to be in cover, armor contempt. So straight away, that's undone 2 points of AP.
Yeah, exactly. And you know things like vindicators in cover with armor contempt, even if you're hitting them with like melter weapons, AP4 weapons, they still get a 4-up against that. So it can be yeah, it can be very tanky. So don't just assume that you're just gonna delete their save, because it could be a lot better than you think it is. But yeah, I think that covers it. So thank you, Scrivo, for joining me on this one. It was a bit of a short one, but as we say, there's it's not like 1,000 Suns where there's 1,001 different bullshit strategies and tactics that you can throw at people. So it's just shoot them and hope they die. So yeah, so as I say, thank you so much, Scrivo, for coming on. If there's anything that you guys would like to see us cover in future episodes, leave a comment down below, and we'll get around to those detachments and or armies in general. And then while you're there, you can subscribe, and if you want to see more videos from us earlier, or you want to if you're interested in things like coaching or just supporting us in general, you can get a membership, and that really helps us out. So once again, thank you for joining me, and that's it for this. That's it for us this time. So see you next time.